join with me, face Jerusalem. We're going to sing the Shema. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be his glorious name, whose kingdom is forever and ever. Amen. Do you have the blessing right there? Thanks. Just join with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bakar benu mikol ha'amim, v'nitan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha-Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who chose us from all the peoples and gave to us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah. Amen. All right, you can be seated. I'm going to read as we go. All right. Okay, let's take out our Bible and our notes. We're going to be looking at two parashahs today, Shoftim and Ki Tetze. Shoftim means judges, and Ki Tetze means when you go. All right? So, let's go ahead and turn to Devarim 16:21. That's Deuteronomy 21 and verse 22. I'm going to read it from the Complete Jewish Bible. Devarim 16:21-22 says this: You are not to plant any sort of tree as a sacred pole beside the altar of Adonai your God, that you will make for yourselves. And 22, likewise, do not set up a standing stone. Adonai your God hates such things. Yeah, other translations say it's an abomination to God, which it is. It's idolatry. And this is what we're talking about. We actually touched on this last week a little bit. And I brought up the idea that idolatry is the one sin in the Bible that you see when Israel commits it, they end up going into dispersion. God removes them from the land completely. He didn't do that for all of the more personalized, simpler type of sin that's common to man. He did it for idolatry. And so that tells us something, that idolatry is really up at the top of the list of what the Lord hates and what is an abomination. So it's really incumbent upon us to take some time to figure out what idolatry is and how does it manifest in today's world. Because, you know, most of us, most human beings in the world today aren't running around carving tiki dolls and so on and so forth. I mean, that still goes on. We still have idols that are made of stone and wood, but most aren't engaging in that kind of behavior. But idolatry is still a number one issue in our society. Kent, you have to use the microphone.
Religious Jews are constantly saying that Christians are not going to heaven because they're idolaters. They are believe in idolatry.
Right.
And other than in Catholic statues and things like that, I really don't know what they're talking about.
Well, one of the issues is the Trinity.
Oh, okay.
That's the biggest issue with the Jew and the Muslim. They believe that Christians worship three gods.
do we?
No, we don't. We worship one God in three persons.
Yes.
And it's so misunderstood. And I'm glad you brought that up. It's a great question because oftentimes, guys, our theology, our dogma, our doctrines can become idols. If your dogma comes above what the Word is teaching, you've got yourself an idol. Now, of course, we all believe in whatever doctrine we believe in. And hopefully you believe it with all your heart. But you have to understand something about the Word of God. The Word of God is designed and written and created in such a way that it becomes everything to everybody at all times. What that means is there is not one interpretation that fits all circumstances. So again, what that means is your dogma is not necessarily 100% backed by the Word of God all the time. We have to be really careful of that because Christians in particular, we put a lot of our faith in our doctrinal study. And it's because as Western thinkers, we're systematic in our thinking. Systematic theology was one of my favorite courses in Bible school because it's just systematized, 1 + 1 = 2. It's just that simple. And so if this scripture says this and this scripture says this, then obviously it means this. And that is not really the case. It can mean that, but it can also mean a lot of other things with it. Does that make sense? Now this is very important because if you start allowing your doctrine to dictate how you are to interpret the Bible, how to interpret Torah, then your doctrine has superseded Torah and the Spirit of the living God, who's the one that teaches us what Scripture teaches, and now you have an idol. Does that make sense with everyone? Yeah. Very important to understand that because as Christians, and we are Christian believers, as Christians, that is a pitfall to Christianity. We get so set in our dogma that we can't see anything else. This is why we have so many denominations. How many? 30, what is it?
38,000.
38,000 denominations. And the reason for that is because we feel our doctrine is worth splitting over, it's worth dividing over, it's worth fighting over. And that really isn't the case. There's only one non-negotiable in the Word. I know you get sick of hearing this, but it's so true. And if you hold to this, it'll help you in your walk. And that's Yeshua and Him crucified. Everything else is up for debate. Everything. And so we just have to understand that. Sharon, use the microphone.
The more I live, the more I understand that Hebrew definitely is a holy language. And that's why I really like understanding what the Hebrew word means. And
Yeah.
Hebrew is such a depth language that each letter contributes like a facet on a diamond, another aspect of what that word is incorporating.
Exactly.
And so it can have a lot of different meanings, actually.
Right.
Depending on which letter you're choosing to be the dominant letter.
Yeah.
The Aleph, of course, is the ox, the father, the head. You can go on and on.
Right.
But it also means that Hebrew is a depth line, is a kind of fluid. It's fluid in its meaning.
Right.
And I always like when you go into the Hebrew meanings of a word. I kind of block out the Greek because, I just think God works through the Hebrew.
Right.
But anyway, it's Now I forget what my point is.
Well, that it's very explicit language.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and it's interesting to note, I mean, one of the things we were taught in Bible school, and of course, I think you've probably heard it from nearly every pulpit in the world from the Christian pastors and teachers, that Greek is one of the most intricate and defined languages ever. I don't find that to be true. Now, I'm not a Greek scholar, but I can tell you this. When you get down in the Hebrew, like you said, every letter has meaning. That's not the case in Hebrew. Or in the Greek, I mean, thanks. So I find that the Hebrew is much more in-depth than the Greek. And I learn a lot more from the Hebrew than I do from the Greek. Frank?
Yes, in regard to the 38,000 different denominations, it's got to be true that some church splits are justified or necessary.
Yeah, that's a good point. Some are, but not 38,000. One of the things that the Lord hates in Proverbs is division and strife between the brothers. So if you're willing to split a church or to leave a church over doctrinal issues, you better be darn sure that heresy, outright heresy, is being taught. Not necessarily something that's being taught that you don't understand yet, because let me tell you, I'm 47 years old in the Lord, 48, whatever it is, 47. I know a lot more about the Scripture than a person that's been in the Lord for 15 years. I know things that a 15-year-old just doesn't know. And so they may come and argue with me, which has happened many times, and but if they're willing to leave over that, what's guiding them? Their immaturity and their lack of understanding. So you have to understand that yes, there are reasons, but you don't leave because you disagree with an interpretation, and you don't leave just because you don't understand something. And if you go back to what I started off this morning with, that there's only one thing non-negotiable, the Lord and Him crucified, then interpretation, you have a lot more freedom now to relax in our faith. Because you can go, well, I don't see it that way. It's very interesting, but when you have two Jews, the Jews are known for fighting over Scripture. We always joke around, 3 Jews, 5 opinions. Well, the same is true in Christianity, I might add. And the difference is when 2 Jews disagree on Scripture, they may get mad, raise their voices, so on and so forth, but one never accuses the other of not being Jewish. They just don't do it. 2 Christians get together and they fight, the voices are raised. It's only a matter of time until one says, "You're not even a believer." And that just isn't true. You may think that their thought is totally off the wall, but you may find out years later that maybe they were a little closer to truth than you thought they were. So just be careful with that. Gary.
When I was in college, I had many doctrinal debates with other people. And the one thing I noticed was they always tried to convince me of what they believed.
Yeah.
And then I realized it always goes nowhere.
Right.
And then I asked them a question when they were telling me their doctrine, why do you believe that? And it was, they don't know.
Yeah, my pastor said.
That's what they grew up with.
Yeah.
And the thing I'm realizing is the more that I learn, the less that I know.
Well, that's really true, and that's the mark of a wise man.
Much of it is when we have these doctrinal biases, belief systems, we assume this in our head. And even when we read Scripture to the contrary, it's kind of like a blinding of understanding, because we read into what we want to believe.
Right.
And it's not until it's all about the traditions and teachings and myths of men. Until we eliminate those that's what I've had to do. Until we eliminate those assumptions completely and look at it brand new and fresh and clean without those premature conclusions and assumptions, and then all of a sudden things jump off the page like Peter denying Christ when the crow cries 3 times.
Right.
I thought it was a rooster
Yeah.
for
Right.
years and years and years and years and years.
Right.
Taught that.
Yes, and if you look at all the Christian movies,
Yeah.
it's a rooster, but it's not.
No, it isn't. That's how division comes, because we insist on having our way. Kath?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that's what's going on in our political system, right? We've got all these people that they're believing
Yeah.
these lies over here, but they don't even know why they believe them because they're following the crowd. But I was just gonna say, it's so true. They say 70 facets to every scripture,
Right.
and it shows me that the way that the Lord wrote His Word is what makes it. It's whatever we need when we need it. So like even
Yeah.
what we learned this weekend about the vine, and it says He takes away the branches that don't bear fruit. We learned right there, there's 2 different meanings right there. It could mean He takes them away completely, or it could mean, as the vine dresser, He lifts them up and encourages them on a trellis so they can grow and be healed from their disease. So it's whatever He ministers
Right.
to each one of us. And when we hear a message, we all go home receiving what we need,
Yeah.
because that's how He wrote His Word. Amen. It's
Yeah.
alive and living. And we can't be dogmatic, and that is what divides.
Yeah, likewise, when the word says He cuts those branches off and throws them in the fire, 90% of Christianity thinks that means they're going to hell and they lost their salvation. What about the fiery trials that Peter talks about? Maybe they're not going to the fires of hell. Maybe they're going into the fires of trial. You see? And so what happens is we get so dogmatic on these things when I had a friend that used to tell me all the time, don't go into a battle of wits half-armed. It's just not wise. And when we go in and we say, well, this is what it means. No, that's not necessarily what it means. That's part of what it means. Make sense? Sharon?
I've got one. God's tent, the longer I've been in the Messianic, I understand God's tent is very big.
Yes.
And if we can kind of judge our brothers and sisters within Christianity, we are the body of Messiah.
Right.
And they have a specific job to do, whether it's to take the gospel to the whole world, but maybe it's something else.
Right.
Maybe it's to reveal to the Gentiles the understanding of Hebrew roots of our faith.
Right.
Or maybe, and we look quite different from one another.
Yeah.
And we hold on to different truths. It's not that we reject some,
Right.
but we tend to concentrate on the ones that God has given to this congregation or
Right,
that congregation. And I think that's a good thing. And
Yeah.
the longer, it used to be in our youth, Bill and I, like you, would get into, discussions, and they could get quite heated.
Yeah.
But we almost never do anymore. In fact, I can't even think the last time we had a
Yeah.
difference of opinion, because we understand that if they believe that Messiah is the Son of God and that He died for us in our stead, and they have received that blessing, that eternal life, well, then they're our brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And we certainly could be wrong as well. And so we're not dogmatic anymore about
Right.
anything. And I
Right.
think that's a lot you, because
Yeah.
just saying over and over again, there's only one thing,
Yeah.
and that's Messiah and Him crucified. So
Yeah.
I want to thank you.
You're welcome, and that's why we really don't teach doctrine here, because the Lord didn't teach doctrine. How many of you would say the Lord's doctrine was probably spot on? But I also submit to you, if I'm right, and dogma can't be just funneled into one channel, maybe that's why he didn't preach doctrine. Because even his unique position of understanding all of it as the real truth, it just doesn't pertain to everybody at all times. Maria, let me get Kent first, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're worried about the 37,000. We go to the senior center in Big Bear. They serve lunch all the time, and there was a Greek man sitting opposite me, and I said, "Oh, good, I'll have a chance to practice the words in Greek I know." And what he told me was, there was another guy who was the chaplain of the fire department. We were talking about religion,
Yeah.
and I asked him. He said, "Oh, no. You know, in Greece today," he said, we don't follow Greek Orthodox anymore. We are going back to the old religions of Zeus and just what you were saying about idol worship.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing today.
I know.
So we have more to worry about than the 37,000 Christian denominations.
Yeah, a lot of people are returning to their ancient paths. We have to remember that, and that's not always the ancient paths we're talking about. Maria, and then we got to move on.
I'm going to quote you.
All right. Here we
said,
go.
Ordinance. The reason we have ordinance is because it's man's way of trying to understand God.
Yeah, that's the idea behind doctrine. Doctrine
Unquote.
is, you're right. Doctrine is an attempt on man's part to understand how God operates. So in that sense, there's nothing wrong with it, but that's like an ant trying to figure out why you do what you do. It's utterly ridiculous and useless. It's a useless practice. You'll know how God operates by watching what he does within the midst of the body. And you may or may not understand why he does what he does. I don't. You know, as the pastor, I have the unique, Kathleen and I have the unique position of knowing a little bit about everybody in the body that everybody else doesn't know. And so when God does something, we go, I see. You know what I mean? And whereas other people are coming up with all their thoughts and judgments and ideas, we're going, no, I don't think that's it. I think it's quite different, something else. God's doing something here. And there's a reason for that. It's because we have some information that you may not have. And it shapes our understanding of what God is doing and why he's doing it. And even that's not the complete story. Amen? All right, so let's move on. So he says here, it's very unique the way this is worded, because in Deuteronomy 16:21 and 22, and I'm going to start with 22, okay? We're going to talk about the sin of, in Roman numeral 2, syncretism and idolatry. We've talked about this before, but this is a subject that we have to continually be returning to, because it's safe to say that I don't think there's a believer anywhere that hasn't fallen into idolatry at some time, some point, to some degree. It's a very deceptive sin, and it traps us, and we don't even realize it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So syncretism and idolatry. Idolatry, in my opinion, is a believer's biggest problem. Just think about all the sins that you have running around in your life, whatever they might be. I believe idolatry is your worst sin. And I include myself when I say this.
Can I just add?
You can.
The reason why is because it breaks the first commandment, the most important commandment, right?
Yeah, we're going to get into that. That's good. It's the most deceptive weapon of the enemy because, like I said, we don't go around with tiki dolls hanging around our necks these days. Idolatry for you and I, by and large, is created by something good, something that God has put into our life. Okay? And because God put it into our life, we think that it can hold this lofty position above all other things, and we're okay. And we're not okay with that. God will never play second fiddle to anybody or anything, period. And so we have to be on our toes that we never get anything above him in our life, even for a brief moment. This is where we get nailed. I mean, most of us aren't walking around with some thing in our life that is just above God and it's blatant to everybody. And no, it's for a short time. But don't we reap what we sow? Isn't that what the word teaches? So how many know that it only takes a second for an enemy to come in? And you might fall into the same issue time after time after time, and no enemy comes in, and then one more and the enemy comes in. Okay? So as we talk about this, think about this. It's the most deceptive weapon of the enemy, and it's the most destructive of all sins. It's the most destructive. Okay? So, here's how Webster defines idolatry. Excessive devotion or admiration or reverence for some person or something. Excessive devotion or admiration. Have we ever fallen into that? We have. All of us have. There's nobody here that's guiltless on this point. Well, there you have it. And syncretism is defined this way: blending or assimilating the views of one religion with another. Just assimilating the views of one religion into another. Okay? So let's talk about this. Yeah. Kent.
Sometimes in life there's a necessity to concentrate on something. So meaning, I'm not going to think about my kids, I'm not going to think about God, I'm going to concentrate, let's say, in driving in the snow, in a two-wheeled vehicle, right? I'm going to concentrate.
Right.
Constantly. I'm not going to think about God. So am I a temporary idolatrist because I'm concentrating on safely arriving at my destination?
No. That's a good question.
Not excessive devotion.
It's not excessive, or it's not devotion, it's not admiration, it's not reverence for. You're concentrating on the thing at hand. Okay? So you're not putting something above God.
Yes.
Taking time away.
Taking time away from God is one way that we measure this. We're going to talk about this in a few minutes. Let me go down this list, and then we'll go back and we'll kind of start reiterating. In letter A, idolatry is spiritual adultery. Think of it this way: spiritual adultery. And adultery is when you have love for one. It was Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young who came up with perhaps the best definition. If you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with. How many remember that? Well, that is a pretty decent definition of adultery, right? And so, if we are, let's say we're the bride of Messiah, and then we put something above him. We're dealing with somebody right now in counseling that doesn't have time to talk to his wife, but he texts and talks to girls on the phone all the time. There's been no physical interaction, but this is adultery.
Any girls? Or his daughters?
Not daughters, no.
We just have a few people that are trying to get on, but I'm not seeing any attempts. I told them to try again.
Okay. 2 people waiting. Let me view this.
I'm not seeing any to let them in. Is that something you have to do? Because
Oh, I didn't make you the co-host.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Make me the co-host.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry. I've got to make Kathleen the co-host here. Okay.
They can't hear it. It asks permission to let you in.
Yeah, they've been trying. Pastor Colin.
Okay, you're the co-host, Kath.
All right, here we go.
Okay, now you're good.
Thank you, sir.
All right, good. Sorry. All right.
Here we are.
So what we have then is your love is towards one, but then you're not keeping the fidelity. That's adultery. I'm married. I don't go out to lunch with women. And if I have to go out for like a business thing or something, I usually try to take Kathleen with me. At the very least, I let her know who I'm with and where I'm at. Does that make sense? Because if I love her, but I'm going out, even for an innocent lunch, that is borderline adultery. Adultery is not just the sexual act, guys. It's the thought. This is what the Lord told us. He said, if you look at a woman with lust or another person with lust, you've already committed adultery. So he takes it to a much higher level. Does he not? All right. So idolatry is spiritual adultery. Simple as that. B, idolatry is the sin that brought dispersion. Dispersion. What?
Idol worship is.
We're not there yet.
Oh,
Okay, go back to Devarim 5:33. I'm going to read from the Good News. This is the Lord speaking to the people. He says, obey them all. What's he talking about? The mitzvot, right? He's talking about the commandments. Obey them all. And as we learned from the Didache, if you can't do them all, do as many as you can. All God is asking from you is the most faithfulness you can produce. And how many know that's going to grow over time? If the Lord should tarry 10 years from now, hopefully you're going to be producing more faithfulness than you are today. Does that mean you're not saved today? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means your growth. You're growing. You're in process. Remember, this is all about the journey. We did a whole Sukkot with that title years ago. It's all about the journey. And it really is. So he says, obey them all so that everything will go well with you and so that you will continue to live in the land that you're going to occupy. Now, the Lord never promised Israel to you and I, but what he has done is we have our own land. It's right here. It's what God has given to me. And God has been very gracious to me. He has blessed me in so many ways. That's my blessed land, right? And so he says, if you want to live in that blessing in the land for a length of time, then obey me. Don't be committing spiritual adultery. Don't be getting engaged in idolatry. Because if you do, I can remove you from the land, or I can remove the land from you. It can go either way with God. Now, this has nothing to do with your salvation, but this certainly has everything to do with your blessings and your growth. Amen? So he says, make sure you obey as much as you can. In letter C, idol worship is evil. How many know there's a difference between being bad and being evil. Does everybody understand that? I mean, evil goes beyond the boundaries of bad.
It goes beyond ugly.
It goes beyond ugly. Evil is evil. There are not many evil human beings, in my opinion. There are some, but not many compared to the population. There's a lot of bad human beings. And you and I typically, hopefully, you don't fall into evil. You do fall into bad, though, sometimes. Does that make sense? So, idol worship is evil. We'll talk about this more in a second.
Just the definition of evil is morally reprehensible, sinful, wicked.
That's good. Yeah,
Reprehensible.
that's a strong word. So idol worship is evil in letter C. It's the ultimate, according to the rabbis, it's the ultimate violation of God's covenant. The ultimate. In fact, the rabbis tell us in number 1, they say that idolatry is actually the denial of his very existence. So when you fall into idolatry, the rabbis teach that you're actually denying the existence of our God. Sharon.
I found that the more grateful I am for everything, keeps that evil away. If you thank God for everything, I mean the air you breathe, your surroundings, the home that you're in, your husband, your wife, your children, I mean, continually thank Him
Right.
for all that He has given us. And I think that really keeps that evil abated and away. You can't fall into it, I don't think, if you're grateful.
Certainly won't hurt, that's for sure. You know, we've talked about this before. The Orthodox Jewish people try to praise God and thank God 100 times a day. And I tried it for a short period of time and never even came close. You know, I got 10 or 15.
Did you have your little clicker?
Start with the Amida, and you've already got 18 off the list.
Yeah. It is hard because what happens is you get sidetracked with, like Kent so eloquently spoke of earlier, we're driving in the snow with two-wheel drive and we're concentrating on the things of life. It's not that you're putting something above God, but you're just so concentrated that God gets squeezed out of the picture. Whereas when you thank Him 100 times, you have to really be conscientiously thinking, okay, what can I thank Him for now?
But when I'm driving in the snow, I'm, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord.
How about the fog?
Yeah.
Thank Him every mile.
Yeah.
The fog is worse.
Gary.
Oh my,
Would that have helped Balaam and the donkey?
It might have.
He had thanked instead of concentrating.
It might have, but you have to remember Balaam went with an agenda. He was already, Balaam was evil, in my opinion.
And yet
And,
God
and,
went
and according to the
and
New
spoke through
Testament as well.
him, and God spoke through him.
God can speak through anything, anybody. Guys, just because somebody gets a good word doesn't mean they're from God.
Yeah, but he was evil. I thought God couldn't be in the same room with evil.
he
Well,
uses everything, right?
He uses everything. He doesn't inhabit the evil person, but he certainly is in control. I mean, so when God chooses to intervene, that's that. Nothing interferes with that, right? So Balaam went with his own agenda to curse God and get paid for it. That's a double whammy. And God just put it as, Balaam tried to say the words and they came out completely opposite. He blessed Israel. And he's going, man, I don't know what's going on, but my tongue's got a mind of its own today. It's doing its own thing. Because God just wasn't going to have Balaam cursing Israel at that point in time. It's simple as that. Makes it.
What did you say about people cursing you?
Use the microphone. What did I say about people cursing me? What about it?
You said that it would bounce off or that it wouldn't.
The Bible says that a curse without cause won't land. So if you've got your life pretty well in order, the chances of somebody speaking a curse that actually sticks on you is very slim.
They cursed Yeshua, right?
They cursed Yeshua, yeah. I mean, so I don't worry about, hyper-Pentecostalism, which has a lot of believers by the throat. And listen, I'm a Pentecostal, that's what I am. The only people I even listen to, ever, are Pentecostals. But their dogma just what we were saying earlier, their dogma gets in the way and blinds them. Because even though there's a truth in it, it's not the whole truth. So they get all spooky about who can pray for me, who can't pray for me. I don't worry about any of that. You want to pray for me? Pray for me. You think I'm worried about that? I'm not. Why am I worried about that? Because I've got my life in order. I keep my life, it doesn't mean I don't have my dips, I do. But I keep my life in order and I stand on the Word of God and the promises of God. And that does not bother me. It doesn't throw a wrench into the works for me. And some people go, I don't want that person praying for me. And we're talking about people and other believers in the body. That's ridiculous.
Personal thing.
It's a personal thing. But it's based on a lack of faith, in my opinion. Now I don't go and blast them and say, well, you lack faith. I just go, well, get somebody else to pray for you then. That's all right. Whatever.
Does that work with telemarketers?
Telemarketers?
Yeah, they keep calling.
Telemarketers,
I'm gonna curse you.
yeah. Telemarketers are a whole new breed. What can I tell you?
Evil.
They always say to me on the phone, are you interested in saving money? I go, nope. The conversation's over. One guy came out from the gas company one day and he wanted to put insulation in our house. And he said, I just need to measure your house. I said, oh, I'm not going to buy anything. He said, well, just let me measure it. So I said, fine, go ahead and measure. He comes back and says, I got the measurements. I go, I don't care. Leave. I told you I wasn't buying anything.
I said, what is this guy doing here?
He's measuring the house for insulation. She said, why? I said, he wants to. He can waste his time all day. Don't waste my time. I said, I'm not buying it, and that's the deal.
Oh my gosh.
We do that with the telemarketers. They're selling timeshares. We'll go to the thing, we'll say, we're not buying any timeshare. Are you kidding me? We're here for the vacation. And some go, well, it's crazy. Yeah, they're a whole new breed. Gary, let's get back on course here.
As you distinguish between bad and evil, the same thing I think with the idolatry, we can put people, hobbies, items ahead of God as far as what we're interested in. That may be bad. But going back to various people groups and nation states that worshipped the spiritual entity of that nation state or people group, like Moloch, things like that, that they're actually, through a physical representation, worshiping, one of the fallen heavenly hosts
Right.
that is running that, like Daniel, the Prince of Persia that restrained everything, that entity that's behind that nation state, that people would, the idolatry worship of that entity,
Right.
I see as one aspect, which I think when Israel fell into is when, the captivity and the just
Yeah.
thing occurred, as opposed to, yeah, I got this brand new car I'm working on, I love it, blah, blah, blah. That is at a different level of idolatry.
Most definitely.
Than, you know, the actual worship and submission to a fallen entity that is behind the physical idol of representation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's different levels. Today I'm speaking mostly on the personal level because that's what we deal with. I mean, now if we had a Corvette set sitting up on the altar there, and you know what I mean, and that was like, you know, the holy one, then the church at large could go into dispersion, be disciplined. If you've got a car and you're just spending too much time with it, and you know every Shabbat you're out there waxing it, it's going to be your land that gets taken away, not mine. See what I'm saying? So God obviously is fair in all his rulings and his dealings with us. So he knows when it's a group event, and he knows when it's an individual issue. And like I said, because we're not worshiping these kind of false deities typically, it doesn't become a congregational issue so much. Although it can. It can. I mean, so, you know, so you just have, it's a very thin line. I mean, I've seen churches that have put in new furniture and new carpeting, and all of a sudden, you know, the room's off bounds. Yeah. Well, that's a problem. Guys, I always say the carpet is here to serve us, not us the carpet. So spill something on it. That's what it's for. You know what I mean? Now, obviously, we don't want to do that, but it's not the end of the world if we do, right? And we're not going to, and we've had to struggle with that because we have a fellowship hall, which we're in now. It's small, so when we do a main thing, we have to move food out into the sanctuary. Our sanctuary acts as a multi-purpose room for us at times, and it has to. And so we try to keep as much sanctity in there as we can and keep all of the more natural activities in here. But the sanctuary is not above God. Right. Yeah. Hello. Right. And this is one of the problems the Jews got into. The temple became higher than God. And we're not going there at Shiloh. We just aren't. I understand the sanctity of that, but that's here to serve us. It's just like the Shabbat was made for man, not man for the Shabbat. See how you have to keep these things in line. It's not an easy task. It's difficult. We just have to be on our toes all the time so we don't inadvertently fall into either syncretism or idolatry unaware. Janie?
When I take the occasion to witness to people, they're usually middle class, or what I usually think of as middle class, people who are hardworking. They take care of their yard. They, mind their children. They go to work every day. They do what I consider to be very good things.
Right.
But I've discovered that witnessing to people like that,
yeah,
who really do a lot more good things than I do, as far as, keeping order and things like that. But the very functions or ideals or formats that they live by, those formats and those ideals, like I always change my sheets every single Saturday, and I always do laundry every single morning on Saturday mornings. When you have formats like that get to the place that they dominate your life, and that there is nothing above those formats. I mean nothing. If you sweep your driveway every single Monday afternoon at 4:00, no matter what.
Right.
You're so tied into the programming that you believe makes you righteous. and you never deviate from it, ever, ever, ever. It's like robotical.
Right.
And I think that we're living in a time now where there's so much chaos around us, like
Yeah.
people that are burning down Portland, Oregon, and crazy things like that, or doing other really bizarre things. The people now in our country are finding righteousness, or they're labeling themselves as being righteous because they stick to those traditions that they do every day, and they're still going to work, and so they kind of see that as their salvation. They think they're saved.
Yeah. It's easy to fall into that. Let me move on. Okay.
Just a comment here. I had looked at a woman and sinned and immediately said sorry to God. And I know this sounds amazing. The Lord answered me. He said, I'm not worried about who you look at. I'm worried about who you don't look at. And there's so much divine wisdom in what I was answered.
Yeah.
You know, it's because he meant I was giving credibility to something, which I should be giving credibility to everybody I'm not looking at.
Right.
And that was from the Lord himself, I have to say.
Yeah. And the Lord's trying to speak to you there. However, that doesn't condone looking at women with a lustful eye.
Yeah.
But he was dealing with you on a different matter at that moment.
Yeah.
And we always have to remember that, you know, God only shows you what he wants to show you.
Right.
Is everybody aware of that? I mean, you know, yeah, God showed me this, and God showed me that, and God showed me this other thing. That's great. But he showed you because he probably wants you to deal with it.
Right.
There's a good chance of that. You know, you read about these people that go to heaven and they all come back with a different story. That's because God only shows them what they need to see. It's not that they all went to a different place or there's no heaven because they can't agree on what they saw. God showed them what he wanted to show them, and that's how he deals with you and I. And so even though God can speak very, very clear to you, that doesn't make it a doctrine for the church.
Right.
And immaturity has a habit of creeping in there sometimes, and we think because God showed me it, this is now a truth for everybody.
Right.
And that just isn't the case. Make sense? Okay, so let's move on. Denial of his very existence. And in number 2, the rabbis teach us that there's 3 mitzvot that require death. 3 mitzvot that the rabbis say, you better take death rather than doing these 3 things. And those 3 things, so what that is in number 2 in your notes, no obligation or threat ever justifies. If somebody puts you under obligation or somebody threatens you to do certain things, no obligation or threat ever justifies A, idolatry, adultery, or murder. That's idolatry, adultery, and murder. These 3, the rabbis say, you're better off if you take death. So if you're being threatened upon pain of death with something, and it's one of these 3 things, you know,
Bow down and worship.
Bow down and worship me or you're going to die. What did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel say? Well, whatever. We're not worshiping you. Our God is able to deliver us, but even if he doesn't. Guys, these guys didn't have this supernatural, incredible faith. They weren't sure what was going to happen. They said he's able, but we don't know if he's going to or not. Right? And they said, but we're not going to bow down. Daniel said the same thing. Several times. Most of us are faced with this at some point in time. And quite honestly, in our day, in our generation, we're coming very close to these kinds of scenarios, I think. I think we're bumping up against these things that I'd rather not be bumping up against, to tell you the honest truth. Because these are not easy decisions. You know. And this is why we've got to toughen up. This is why we've got to fight the good fight. We've got to learn to be good soldiers in the Messiah. We've got to learn how to fight the spiritual fight, because most of the church is going to get taken out, I believe.
Number one, denial of his very
existence. When you commit idolatry and you start worshiping something above God, it's like acknowledging that he doesn't even exist. Because if he in fact is above all things, if he in fact is the creator, if he in fact is your savior, why would you put anything above that? Make sense? And yet we do. For most of us, it's fairly benign things, and it's kind of on a temporary mode. But the problem with that is we open ourselves up to discipline during that, even a short period of time, and or we open ourselves up to demonic activity in our life because of that activity. So we don't want that. We don't want our land being invaded or being ruined, or we don't want to be removed from the good blessings that God has given us. Guys, blessings and curses work very similarly. They build upon each other. Think about it. God blesses you. He says, be faithful in the little, and what? Much more will be given. So he blesses you with a little bit, and if you're faithful, he blesses you with more. And the pile starts to build. The pile starts to grow. It's a blessing that's growing in your life. How many of you can say, you know what, I see blessings in my life that are just growing?
Amen.
How many can see that? You know, I see it in my own life, just blessings that are growing. Maybe they're not growing as fast as I'd like to see them grow. Maybe they grow and then, you know, I do something crazy or whatever, and some of the height is is brought down a little bit, so to speak. But curses are the same way. They build on each other. It's the little foxes that spoil the vine. It's typically not big events that come in and blow you out of the saddle. It's typically little things building up. Kathleen and I have a saying about snowflakes. One snowflake is no big deal. A lot of snowflakes shuts down a city. Stops traffic.
At least three.
At least three.
At least three.
At least three.
In Maria's case, 3 snowflakes and it shuts everything down.
and the electricity.
Maria.
Is this why Paul said that it's better that you should not marry? And why Yeshua never married, although there's new teachings that says that he was married?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't give much credence to those teachings, but Paul is talking about burning with sexual lust and desire. So he says, and this is something that men deal with.
John the Baptist, I don't see him burning.
Well, he had self-control. He was under control.
They said he's a male.
You know,
I mean,
statistically,
you know,
men in their prime think of a woman about every 8 seconds. That's the stats. Men in their prime sexual condition think about women about every 8 seconds.
Well, that explains a lot.
It explains all sorts of things.
That's why 8 seconds is the standard in bull riding.
Yeah. Yeah, you can only get your mind off the woman for 8 seconds. Yeah, I don't know about that, Ray, but sounds feasible to me. But he says if you're going to burn with lust and sexual desire, it's better to get married. because that helps to quell some of that. Although it doesn't really take it away.
But is that a compromise?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's a compromise. I'd say it's an answer. It's a remedy to an issue. And then he says, but the problem with getting married, of course, is now you have to worry about the concerns of your spouse and also worry about the concerns of God. Yeah. So it becomes this balancing act. Remember, balance is this dipping back and forth. Remember? It's not holding everything just steady as she goes. It's a dipping back and forth. Sometimes the word is very clear. When we live with our wives in an understanding way and we put them above ourselves and we take care of their needs, we are pleasing God. You see what I'm saying? So now, can you take that too far? Of course you can. You can take anything too far. And this becomes that balance that we have to deal with. I mean, you can't treat your spouse like a second-rate citizen because God is number one in my life. You know, first off, that's not true. He may be number one, he may not be, just depending on the moment you find yourself in. So, all I'm saying, you know, one of my favorite scriptures is the scripture says, don't think more highly of yourself than you should. To me, that is a life-saving scripture. That helps me tremendously. Because we can allow anything in our life to puff us up. It's incredible.
Doesn't take much.
It doesn't take much. You know, if you think your doctrine is right, you get puffed up. If you think your marriage is better than other people, you can get puffed up. If you make more money than other people, you can get puffed up. You drive.
Keep the commandments, you can get puffed
If you keep the commandments, you can get puffed up. So, don't think more highly of yourself than you should. You know, let God elevate you if He's going to. Otherwise, you just be about the Father's business. You're much safer there. Make sense? Uh-oh, Bill's in the house.
One of the things that's hard whenever you go to, look at the Bible too is it's an accurate history, as you know, and not everything always applies to me possibly today. I mean, when Paul was talking about it'd be better not to marry, I mean, these people are getting slaughtered by the lions in the Colosseum.
Yeah.
Okay, do you really want to get married, raise a family in a situation where you're basically in hiding?
Yeah.
And going back to Nehemiah, he laid a hand on anybody that sold on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure I can go into McDonald's and start punching people out that are selling on the Sabbath.
Right.
Okay, not everything that is said is
Right.
what God says
To do.
just because Nehemiah did it.
Right. We have to discern that. That's a story. It's like David went in and took the showbread. Well, even if the showbread was there, that doesn't give you the right to go in and take the showbread. See, we have to, just because something is mentioned there, it's a historical account. They tear down the Asherah poles. David killed two of his own servants because they came and they gleefully reported Saul's death. Well, you can't be doing that. That's really not where we're at today.
You can't tear down the Washington Monument?
Not really. Well, you can, but there's going to be consequences. And you're not going to be able to pray for God to bail you out afterwards, because there's a different set of rules today in our society. And the word brings society rules alongside of biblical Torah many, many times. Back in the day, I mean, if somebody sinned, you took them out in the parking lot and stoned them. You don't do that today. And if you did it, it wouldn't be God. Even if you caught somebody in the closet fornicating, committing adultery, you can't take them out in the parking lot and stone them.
Just shoot them.
Well, that might work, but you see what I'm saying? You can't do that because God takes society rules and works with them at the same time. And how do we understand this? It's very hard for us to understand this because, is that compromise? Some people say so. Some people should say, take them out and stone them. That's what the Bible teaches. Well, I'm not convinced of that myself.
He is without sin, cast the first stone.
Well, that pretty well precludes anything happening ever. Yeah, you can't even go with that because nothing would ever happen then. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's move on. Okay, so everybody understands this idea of idolatry and syncretism. And we need to be on our toes with it. And I think we're in a very vulnerable place as a society right now because with everything that is shaking, and everything's being shaken right now, and all of the turmoil in the world, nothing is as it was. Nothing's concrete anymore. Nothing is solid anymore. It's all very fluid, and we're looking for things to hang on to that are solid. They're immovable. And that can be anything from our bank account to our children, to our grandchildren, to our spouse, even to our church. So we have to be very careful. The only thing that's unshakable is God. He's the only thing. And there's some things that are going to shake long before other things, but these other things are going to shake as well. Everything that can be shaken is going to be shaken. Let me get Sharon first.
Just a question. Can you repeat your definition of syncretism?
Yeah. Syncretism is this: a blending or assimilating the views of one religion into another. We see this, of course, the Catholic Church is notorious for this. The Catholic Church, which was the first Christian church in existence. This is history, you can't deny this. Came into existence in 325, and the Protestants didn't come into being until around the 15 and 1600s. So for 1,200 years, the Catholic Church was virtually the only Christian church on planet Earth. And one of their tenets of evangelism is to go into a nation and sync up Catholicism with the native religion. Yeah, but I'm not interested in the Greeks. The church is what affects us. And so they would come in, and if they came into an Indian society, it didn't matter what they were doing, they would incorporate some of that into the faith. If they went into, and of course the Catholic Church was over the entire earth. So no matter where they went, they took some of the faith premises of those peoples and brought them in and mixed them in with the Catholic faith. This is why if you go down into deep Mexico, Catholicism in deep Mexico is totally different than Catholicism in Canada. Because they've incorporated some of their principles, understandings, even their gods into the Catholic faith. Well, the Protestant church is also guilty of this to a degree. Not as much typically as the Catholic Church, but to a degree. And out of that, we see what's come about is some of the cults. Things like Mormonism, where we elevate the Book of Mormon to the same status, or possibly even, in some people's minds, a greater status than the Bible.
Wow.
See? So now we have an idol. We've synced these two together. And so any other faith that has a book that is indispensable other than the Bible is at the very least borderline cultish. Christian Science, you've got your prophet there, and her books are, by some viewed as right next to the Bible. You've got, even in Judaism, this is a huge problem. Judaism gets into the Talmud and stuff, and the Talmud, it has some good things to say, but like anything, it has some garbage as well. And it's not God inspired. Now, are there some godly inspired thoughts in it? Yeah, I mean, you can get my book and there's godly inspired thoughts, but it's not equal with the Bible, and you don't need my book to understand the Bible.
I'm relieved.
Except for Bill. You need to buy 3 or 4 copies, bro. See what I'm saying? So anytime you see this taking place, even the Virgin Mary is just a perversion of other religions coming in the Catholic faith, where the woman was elevated to that high place. Even though the Bible says Mary's the greatest woman that ever lived. And I believe that. Why do I believe it? Because the Bible says it. But she doesn't bring you to Messiah. You don't intercede through her so you can get to the Messiah, so eventually you can get to the Father. No, the Word teaches you go through Yeshua. Right? Sharon?
The extra biblical books they have a lot of nuggets of wisdom in them.
Yeah.
But yet, again, they're not considered sacred or given by God. But I thought it interesting, I've got the 3 books of Enoch, and at the end of the 3 books, he lists all the angels that he had come in contact with, good and bad, the fallen and the not so fallen. But he lists the angel that gave the word to John Smith. And I don't know if I thought that really interesting, because that is the beginning of Mormonism.
Joseph Smith.
Joseph Smith, sorry.
John Smith was one of the pilgrims.
Oh, okay. Sorry, John. But anyway, I just thought it interesting,
Yeah.
There was a lot of blending of the good and evil back in those days.
Yeah.
And
there still is a lot of that going on. So let's move on, guys. We got to move on. It's already getting late. Turn over to Devarim 17:1 from the Complete Jewish Bible. It says, "You are not to sacrifice to Adonai your God a cow or sheep that has a defect or anything wrong with it. It would be an abomination to Adonai your God." The point that I want to bring out here is this. You and I need to be careful that we never give second best for Adonai. No second best for Adonai. That's your answer in Roman numeral 2. This is easy to do. And for us, in our society, I can't speak for other societies, but for our society, this can manifest itself. Probably one of the easiest ways is through our finance. I'm a little short of cash this week, so I'm going to just take the tithe and I'll repay it next week. Well, you're actually allowed to do that by Torah, but you have to pay back a 20% surcharge, as it were. Which that,
Never happens.
I'm sure that probably happens once in 100,000 times with different people. In fact, what we've learned, what we've seen in pastoring for over these 40 years is if people don't show up on Shabbat and they don't give their tithe, most people forget to give it the following week. They never make it up.
Forget.
They don't forget, they just don't. They count that as a freebie. Well, I wasn't there, so I didn't get charged. Hallelujah. You know, and this is second best. You don't want to give your second best. You don't want to read the Bible after you finish. You know, I was going to say the New York Times, but if you're reading the New York Times, don't even let me know. You know, I'll read the Bible after I finish watching my favorite TV show. You're second best. Now, that doesn't mean you always have to read the Bible before you turn on your favorite TV show. Does it? No. But it's an attitude of the heart that dictates whether it becomes second best or not. Maybe you get your reading done before you turn on the TV. Or maybe you're faithful to do that. You go, well, you know what? This is almost over, and I'm going to read as soon as I'm done. Now, if the Lord says, shut everything down and pick up your Bible, now that's beyond bringing an offering. That's obedience to His Word. And He's saying to you, you know what? This is what I want you to do right now. I'm really bad with that when my second best happens a lot of times at 3 o'clock in the morning. Because what happens is the Lord will wake me up with a dream or something, and He said, get up and write it down. I go, Lord, I'll write it down in the morning when I get up, because I got it all right here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right is right. When I wake up in the morning, more often than not, it is gone. And it's the Lord trying to teach me a lesson, and this is one of my slower lessons. At 3 in the morning, I'm pretty slow. So, you know, so what I'm saying is, you know, I need my sleep more than I need a word from you. Or I go, okay, thanks, Lord, I got the word, but He wants me to write it down because He obviously wants either me to remember it or He wants me to share it later on with somebody else. But I give second best because I go, no, my beauty sleep is much more important right now than writing this word down. If the Lord speaks to you to pray for somebody, even during a service, the Lord says, I want you to pray for that person, and you wait, you say, well, I'll do it after service. How many times does it happen? Not very often. You forget. God wants us to give our best for Him, our time, our energy, and our money. And these are the areas that I want to talk about. In letter A, what are areas for potential best, second best in our lives? These are the main areas. 1 is time, 2 is energy, and 3 is resource. It's very easy to carve out the best portion of time. You have 24 hours in a day. We're all on an equal footing there, aren't we? No one has any more, no one has any less. We have 24 hours. Time.
No, an A.
Areas for potential best, second best. So we can carve out the best time for me. Shabbat is a big one. Shabbat in our society goes against the grain. I mean, Saturday is I mean, think about somebody that works Monday through Friday, and they're trying to have a family time. They're trying to spend time with their spouse. They've got to go grocery shopping. They've got to do the laundry. They've got to do the yard work. I mean, that's crazy. You got 2 days to try to squeak all that in. You go, well, my family's important, yeah, but I can't let the yard go and this, you know, we have things that we have to do. So what do we do with all of that? You have to carve out the best time for God. And I'm not here to talk about whether you should do any of these things on the Shabbat or not. That's a whole nother teaching. What I want to talk about is the time commitments and how you relegate that. And I know for Kathleen and I, no matter what we do on Shabbat after the service, for Kathleen and I, that the best part of the Shabbat time is carved out for God. Period. And it only gets interfered with if there's a lot of blood, which is acceptable, right? So our family, I mean, yesterday after Shabbat, we drove to San Diego for dinner with our daughter and grandkids. We didn't go in the morning. We went in the afternoon. Spent just a couple hours and then came back. Now, some people would get on a case for driving to San Diego on the Shabbat. Others would say, well, you should have gone first thing in the morning, spent all day. Well, first off, that's none of your business. But secondly, we stand before the Lord God with a clear conscience because we've given him the best part of the day he's asked for.
And our kids know to expect that.
And our kids know to expect it. They didn't ask us to come in the morning. They don't do that anymore. They know if we're going to come down on Shabbat, it's going to have to be after service, after we're finished. You see? Now, again, I'm not talking about your practice on Shabbat. That's a different study altogether. What I'm talking about is carving out the best for God that you can possibly present. Because you have, in life, you have other godly obligations that aren't just you and God. Does that make sense? You have things you have to do. You have things that have to be done. You have to take care of your children. When are you going to see your grandkids? See what I'm saying? This is a balancing act. What I'm learning more and more in life is a series of balancing acts. And that's okay. God allows for that. I've honestly come to that conclusion. He allows for that. Whether it's just because we're so dumb we don't know how to do it any other way, or he just knows that that's how it's going to work. God gives freedom. Remember, even slavery. How many know God never condones slavery? Does everybody understand that? God never condones slavery, but he gives a whole set of Torah rules and regulations regulating it. Why? Because he knew it was going to happen. He never condoned polygamy, in my opinion, ever. Multiple wives. And yet, he writes in his Torah all kinds of rules and regulations about it because he knows it's going to happen. He gives us, so what I'm saying is he gives leeway for where we're at in our life. If he didn't, we would all be little barbecued cinders burnt to a crisp, sitting there in your chair. Bill.
I think part of the struggle for balance too is I didn't set this thing up where I work Monday through Friday 40 hours a week and I have my weekend off. And just even the way that we do everything with mortgages and because nobody can afford a house. Yeah. So we become slaves in so many ways.
Right.
And there's one little thing that Sharon and I rejoiced in with self-employment. I never set an alarm. You know, sometimes I sleep in, 7:45.
I've noticed that.
But I never set an alarm. And to me, that's a freedom.
Yeah.
That all my life, I never enjoyed.
Yeah.
You always got that alarm to deal with,
Right.
So a lot of what we do is just, it's not completely my fault. Somebody else has laid this out, and if I'm going to survive in this society, I have to play ball to some extent. That's working Monday through Friday, usually 40, 50 hours a week, and take your break on the weekend and start all over,
Right.
So you got a lot to jam in those 2 days. It's not like the agricultural societies have been over the years.
It's completely different. And we are products of our society. This doesn't justify, but it does explain. And sometimes that's all we need is the explanation. It's the heart. That's what God looks at. God doesn't sit there with a stopwatch to make sure you've given him 5 extra seconds of time over anything else. That's not our God. Our God looks at the heart, and if the heart is towards God, then the heart wants to not give him second best. The heart wants to give him the best we can do. Right? How many know it wasn't just man that fell in the fall? How many know that? It was everything. It was everything fell in the fall. Not just man. The whole earth. I'm of the personal opinion the whole earth is so far gone it can never be brought back, barring the return of the Lord. I think the earth is just gone. The whole system is just it's fallen. It's fallen beyond repair. We've totally destroyed it all. And we can make a difference, but my personal belief is I don't think Bruce Dowell is going to restore it back to the Garden of Eden. I just don't see that. I think I can play little parts and little roles in making it better, right? But barring the Lord returning, we live in a fallen world, a fallen environment. And so we have to make the best we can out of what we've got. I mean, do you think that the disciples in Jerusalem under Roman rule had to work the Lord's guidelines a little differently than Abraham? Quite a bit, I would guess. And even David. The Romans ruled with a rod of iron. You know, you didn't just get up and say, this is Shabbat, I'm not working. That didn't happen. They had to find ways to work in that system. And that's what's incumbent upon each of us. That's one of my favorite scriptures is where David is on his deathbed and it's being recounted in the book of Acts, and it says, David fulfilled all that the Lord had given him to do in his generation. To me, that's a powerful scripture. I love that scripture because I'm accountable for my generation. Should the Lord tarry, I don't know what it's going to be like in 50 years. I'm not going to be here in 50 years.
120.
Well, I might be leaving in 50 years. 75 years. Right? I don't even want to be here in 50 years. Hello?
Well, you may be here in your new body.
I may be here in my new body. That's a different story altogether. Okay? But the point is, I'm not accountable for that generation that's coming, and I'm not accountable for the last generation. We have our own set of problems. He said, don't worry about tomorrow. Today's got enough problems of its own. You got to figure out how to do all of this Torah in your generation. And I think God makes it possible for us to do a large part of it, at least, if not all of it, to maybe a little different spec than they followed 10 generations ago. Make sense? So again, he looks at the heart. So just be true to the heart. Let me get through these, Kent, real quick. Number 2 is energy. Your energy. This is another issue. This is why many people miss Shabbat. Now, the reason I keep bringing up Shabbat is because Shabbat is arguably one of the single most important things to the Lord. You don't have to read far in the Word to discover that the Shabbat is very high on his list. Okay? And we need to do our best to keep that very high on our list. Right? So what happens? Man, you work all night. We notice a huge difference in our Shabbat services between Friday night and Saturday morning. Friday night, people drag in tired and beat up from the week, and trying to get everyone to enter in on Friday night into worship and seeking the Lord for a word and all of this is very difficult. People are tired. It seems to be much easier on Saturday morning after everyone slept. See what I'm saying? Now, that's no indictment against the Friday night people, okay? Which most of you are. But we have a set of circumstances that Saturday morning people don't have, and vice versa. You and I aren't sitting in 109 heat like we were yesterday. It was so hot yesterday, nobody even brought there was no children there. Just our granddaughter, who doesn't even come to this congregation. You know, they either stayed home with their kids because it was too hot, or they didn't bring their kids, whatever. But they had a set of circumstances to deal with that we didn't deal with on Friday night. But whatever that circumstance is, we do our best, and we give our best energy level. And quite honestly, I don't expect people to have the same energy on Friday night that they have on Saturday morning. You know what I'm saying? But we have to do our best. That's what God's asking. He doesn't want second best. And he certainly doesn't want you just to say, well, I worked too hard, so I can't go to Shabbat because I'm just too tired. Plan out your week so you're not too tired. Make sense? And then resource. Resource is our resource. It's our money in our society. It's mostly what resource would boil down to, the giving of our resource. And again, this is only going to get harder in the future. You know, Bill was already talking about how hard it is to work 40, 50 hours a week. But, you know, when we were raising our children, Kathleen stayed home with our kids. We made a conscious decision when we were young, and we were able to do that. I don't think that's even possible in today's world. It's now every household requires a minimum of 2 incomes to survive. And inflation is going up so fast, that's going to quickly change. You're going to have to get a third and maybe a fourth job. You mark my words, that's right around the corner. So what does that do for your energy level? Boy, it just plummets. So how are you going to fit God into this mix? And beyond that, how are you going to try to make him number one in the whole thing? These are legitimate questions that we have to be asking ourselves and trying to figure out and trying to help each other with. And I will tell you, don't forsake the fellowship of the saints, because when you come here tired, you can tell somebody, man, I barely made it. I am just bushed. I am dog tired. And then they go, oh my gosh, I had the worst week I've ever had, and I almost stayed home. Now you've built something there. And you've encouraged one another, because you realize you're not the only person, first and foremost, struggling with this issue. But secondly, you realize that, okay, we're doing the best we can. And then you can encourage each other in that. Guys, we need that more and more with all 3 of these, time, energy, money. We have to be encouraging each other. And the first rule of encouragement is you got to show up. If you're not here, you can't encourage anybody. In fact, if you're not here, I'm going to tell you what it does exactly the opposite. It discourages everybody. Just because you didn't show up. I mean, you come into the room when it's full, there is an energy, even though everyone worked their butts off all week long and they are dog tired. There is an energy in that room just by the number of people. And that creates a synergism, right? For everything else that's going to happen. When you drag in and there's 5 people there with their chins hanging on the ground, that creates a synergism as well, but it's in a negative mode. So just your absence affects the entire body that shows up. Every time. You have to understand that's how important you are. So when you give of your time, energy, and resource, it's not just to the Lord, you're doing it to the body of Messiah. Doesn't the Lord deal with this? He said, if you give a cup of water to somebody in the name of the Lord, you're doing it as unto me. Well, if you show up, even when you're tired, you're doing that for the people and for the Lord both. Janie.
Oftentimes, and I mean oftentimes, I am too tired to come to Shabbat on Friday nights. And the one thing that always makes me come to show up to church is that I actually look forward to seeing my church family.
Yeah.
I look forward to being with them. I look forward to the normalcy of being around people that have, like ideas and like faith. And so for me not to come to Shabbat, I have to literally be unable physically to move or whatever, because it energizes me and it gives me such hope to come, just to come to church.
Well, the Lord sees that every time. And so these are, guys, there's no condemnation if you've missed Shabbat or whatever. This is not, the point is not condemnation here. We all struggle with these things. The point is we all want to do better. That's why we're here today, right? I mean, that's a given. We all want to do better. So these are just some of the areas. What we're talking about today, these are the things that creep in behind the scenes under the covers. These are not the things where the enemy is confronting you face to face. We can all deal with that. Where we get hung up is when the enemy hits us upside the head and we never even saw him coming. And of course, that's most of what he does. But this is designed to give us an awareness of what we're dealing with and how to deal with it in a realistic way. Not with hyper spiritualism. You don't just, you don't pull yourself up by your bootstraps and say, well, I'm just going to give all my money and my time and my energy to God and, hurrah, I'm a super saint. No, that's not how it works. We all have the same struggles. All of us. Everyone in this room there's only so many struggles. And you cross over with other people in the areas you're struggling in. It's simple as that. I mean, I would be condemned for driving to San Diego by many Messianic believers on a Shabbat. I mean, that's like, you might as well just die and go to hell now and get it over with. But I struggle because I've got grandchildren. I've got children. So do I take a day off the middle of the week and check out of the office and go do it? Or do I do it then? Some people say, well, do it on Sunday. Well,
You got Torah study.
I have Torah. Kathleen and I are booked today until probably 7 o'clock tonight, back-to-back bookings. Last Sunday, we didn't get home till 9:30 at night. Guys, this is not a case of, oh, you just have Sunday, just do it on Sunday.
Well, besides that, Shabbat is about fellowship.
It's about fellowship. It's about people. It's about family. Yeah. It's about those things.
Your main day of work.
It's what?
It's your main day of
But
work.
for all of us.
Well,
it's
it
about
is,
love
but
and family.
You know what I mean?
yeah, it is. As a priestly role, it is a main day of work, but it's also a day that we have to keep sanctified. That means different than the other days.
You and all rabbis.
And all people.
Yes, no people.
And these are the struggles we have in our society. I wish our society worked 4/10s, personally. I worked 4/10s when I was working in construction, and 4/10s, 4 days a week, 10 hours a day, gives you 3 days off, and it makes all the difference in your life. It's huge. But our society is not based on that. If it were, It would make our spiritual lives much simpler.
And they can
Honestly.
do it easily.
They can do it easily, and it's more productive.
Yeah, but if all the stores are closed those 3 days, we're not too happy.
But it's not going to happen. Gary?
I think a lot of people really don't realize how much is on you and Kathleen's shoulders, how much is on your plate, how much you deal with, and I just don't think a lot of people realize that, because it's a lot. That's just one thing.
Well,
The other,
everyone has a lot on their plate. There's no doubt.
yeah, but you've got a bit bigger plate than most people.
You got the big bucks too.
I got the big bucks too. You're right.
But the one thing, especially.
Oh, the big butts, not the big bucks. Thank you, Maria. Oh, Kathleen said that. The big butts. Okay.
I think what we really tend to forget is, and a lot of this helped my influence was Rico, but we serve the King of the universe, the master of all creation. Okay, we don't technically serve leadership, elders, pastors, people,
Right.
job. We serve a king.
Right.
And a lot of us don't really have a good understanding of what a monarchy is. When you come before the king,
Yeah.
okay, you come into his kingdom, approach his throne. There's methodology, there's manners, there is etiquette. And I think we lose that concept that everything we represent the King of existence. And when it says, don't take the name of the Lord in vain,
Mm-hmm.
we are representatives, we are ambassadors of his kingship. And I think a lot of us forget the importance and the responsibility and the duty and the etiquette that goes along with that.
Right.
A lot of people think God's like, oh, he's my buddy in the sky, and
Right.
I don't think so. We
Yeah.
serve a great king.
Right. Right. All right. Roman numeral 4. Let's go over to Devarim 17:14. And I'm just going to kind of share with you what 14 through 20 says. I will read verse 19. But basically, this is the laws concerning Israel's kings. And when the king comes to power, he's told in this portion of Torah, he's to do certain things and not to do other things. He's not to acquire lots of horses and riches and wives and gold and silver and all of these things. That's not what he's there to do. That's not his main business at hand. But what he needs to do in verse 18 and 19 is this: when he has come to occupy the throne of his kingdom, he is to write a copy of this Torah for himself in a scroll from the one the Kohanim and the Levavim use. It is to remain with him, and he is to read it every day as long as he lives, so that he will learn to fear Adonai his God and keep all the words of this Torah and these laws and obey them. And the interesting thing here is this, of course, who is the ultimate king of Israel? It's Yeshua. And therefore, if Yeshua is going to, and how many know Yeshua has never been king of Israel yet? He came first as the prophet. He's now in heaven interceding for us. He's now the priest. But when he returns, he'll be the king. Now, when he returns, do you think the Lord is still going to be interested in fulfilling Torah? Of course he is. He has to. I mean, he is the Word, right? So when he returns, and I think it's already in transition, but he has to write his own copy of Torah. And I believe that he writes this on the hearts of believers. He doesn't write this with scroll on scroll, although he might in the millennial reign, because he's to write the copy of this Torah from the one the Kohanim and the Levivim used, so maybe he's just copying it down, or maybe it needs to be on scroll, I don't know. But he's definitely writing it on our hearts, is he not? And this is according to Jeremiah 31:32. I want you to turn over there, we'll read that. 31:32 says, "It will not be like the covenant I made with their fathers on the day that I took them by the hand and brought them out of the land of Egypt, because they for their part violated my covenant, even though I for my part was a husband to them, says Adonai. For this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel in those days, says Adonai. I will put my Torah within them and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will any of them teach his fellow community member or his brother." And this is where this gets personalized. This is where God personalizes it. This doesn't mean you don't need a teacher. Remember in the Brit Hadashah, we have the fivefold ministry. You need, the Lord apparently thought we needed pastors, apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. He wrote it in his word. He felt that we needed those things. So this scripture isn't saying you don't need somebody to teach you the scriptures. What this is saying to us is you'll no longer have any need to teach your fellow community member, your brother, for all will know me. God has written his Torah on your heart, and he will personalize it for you. How do you deal with these struggles that we've talked about today? How do you do it? Because how many know, even though we all share some of the same society problems, isn't it true that you have problems that I don't have, and I have problems that you don't have? We have issues. We have things going on. We have circumstances going on in our lives that are different from one another, and we have circumstances that are the same. So God has to deal with us each differently. And that's what this scripture is saying, in my opinion. He's saying you're not going to need your brother to, you don't need me to tell you how to budget your time so you can keep the Shabbat. Now, I might be part of that work and part of that equation, but you need the Spirit to show you, because it changes. And quite honestly, life is in motion. It changes every week. It's not a one-time fix, is it? So, with this, in Roman numeral 4 in your notes, King Yeshua writes his Torah on the hearts of his people, and he reads it every day. And the read it every day is just as important, because he reads you every day. He reads the Torah he's put on your heart, whatever amount of Torah that is. His Torah, not his notes. It's a little more important than notes. King Yeshua writes his Torah on the hearts of his people and reads it every day. So how many know if you've been walking with God for 40 years and you've been in the Messianic for most of that time, you should know more about Torah than the person that just came out of the church into the Messianic movement. Does that make sense? Right? So he's going to start writing on your heart. So what that means is, to whom much is given, much more is required. So the person that's been 40 years studying Torah is now required and obligated to more obedience than the person that just came in. So he's going to deal with us, he's going to teach us, he's going to speak to us differently. Is he not? Of course he's going to. And if the Lord is willing to make that kind of room for everybody, we need to be willing to make that kind of room. Again, it's not one size fits all. Ever. Ever. We're all different. And it's okay with God, because he made us all different. Do you not think God could have made us all identical? I think he could have. A rubber stamp. It probably would have been easier, quite honestly.
I'm
But-
allowed to have a beer, you're not.
He made every single...
Right.
Well, I'm allowed to.
I mean, you know.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, we all have different... And that can change in your life.
I'm allowed to drive a motorcycle, you're not.
Yeah, now we need to talk about that, brother. You see, these things are God has personalized it. It's very important to understand that. When we do that, we have so much more grace for one another. And I'll tell you, the area where the church does not lack in being judgmental. We've got that one down. Where we lack is we want grace for ourselves, but we are not very free to extend it to others. If you're going to err, and let me just give you a little secret in life, you're going to make lots of mistakes. If you're going to err to the side of grace rather than harshness and legalisms and judgment. You'll do yourself a big favor doing that. And you can go too far with grace. I've shared on that many times. If you're extending grace when God isn't, you're in sin. But I find that generally speaking, God extends much more grace than we're willing to extend to one another. So just learn to extend grace. You know what? This is between you and God. Deal with it. You know, do what you think's right. Study the Torah. Ask questions of the brothers and sisters and get input. Seek counsel from wise and godly people. And then make the best decision you can make. Does it make sense? And you know what? If you've done that, you've done it with prayer, and you've thought you were moving in faith. If you think you're moving in faith, guys, you are. I got news for you. If you really believe this is the right thing to do before God and you do it, you're moving in faith. Even if you're totally wrong. It means you moved in faith, but you were wrong. How many have ever done that? I've done it many times. Yesterday. I don't think I did it yesterday, but I'm glad you're keeping the balance going. Yeah, you're keeping the tally, right? All right. So we see Yeshua. Very important. He's not only writing the Torah on our hearts; he's reading the portion that he's written. And I don't think he writes it all at one time on our hearts. I think he writes it over the course of our lifetime, and possibly further than that. And he reads it every day to see how we're doing. Do you realize when King David was the king of Israel, there was only about 7, maybe 8 books of the Bible? There was the Torah, that's 5. We think there was Ruth. He was in the process of writing the Psalms, so they weren't even here yet.
No printing press.
And what was the, Joshua, book of Joshua. 7 books.
What was the second one that you said?
The Torah, Ruth, and Judges. We don't know when Job was written. And it might have been. So that's why I said 7 or 8. You can throw Job in there if you want. It won't hurt anything. But you see what I'm saying? So even when David was ruling, he didn't even have the complete Bible. So when the Messiah is writing on the tablet of our heart, the Torah, the complete Torah, it happens in stages. Right? Make sense? And he reads it every day to see how you're doing with the part that's been written down on your heart. And when I say written down, we could take that a step further and say that's when you have that conviction. Because until you have the conviction, it's probably not truly written on your heart yet. Maybe in the process of being written, if that makes sense. All right. Roman numeral 5. I got to move here. Devarim 21:10. When you go out to make war against your enemies, and Adonai your God hands them over to you, and you take prisoners, and you see among the prisoners a woman who looks good to you, and you feel attracted to her and want her as your wife, you are to bring her home to your house, where she shall shave her head, cut her fingernails, and remove her prison clothing. She shall stay there in your house, mourning her father and mother for 1 full month, after which you may go in to have sexual relations with her and be her husband, and she will be your wife. In the event that you lose interest in her, you are to let her go wherever she wishes, but you may not sell her for money or treat her like a slave, because you've humiliated her. Very interesting scripture. And there's so many areas we could address on this, but what I want to address is, again, how does this pertain to us? I'm really mostly interested in how it pertains to you and I. That's my pastoral heart. How are we going to make use of this scripture to make our lives better and more godly, okay? And what I've got in the notes, Roman numeral 5, we have been won in battle by Messiah. How many know Messiah won you in battle, right? He fought for you, he died on the cross, he shed his blood, and in so doing, he acquired you. Okay? And when he acquired you, in letter A, he doesn't force us into intimacy. He will never force you into intimacy.
Otherwise, it's not intimacy.
It's not intimate. Yeah, if you're forced into intimacy, it's not intimacy.
No, right.
Does that make sense? I mean, hello, you know. So he never forces us, and I find the wording here very good. After a full month, you may go in and have intimacy, if you so choose. After a month, but again, the Lord doesn't force us. If it takes 10 years for you to enter into an intimate relationship with the Lord, then that's what it is. But I would encourage you to try to do much quicker than that. Okay? And we've been won. We have become slaves, as it were, if you will, or captives here. He doesn't force us into intimacy. And in verse 15, it says, if a man has 2 wives, oh no, that's another issue, I'm sorry. Let's see here. Yeah, in letter B, he forbids favoritism. He's no respecter of persons, right?
Right.
And we get into this in Devarim, in verse 15 of that same chapter 21. He says, if a man has 2 wives, the one loved and the other unloved, we know this is what Jacob ended up with, okay? And both the loved and the unloved wives have borne him children, and if the firstborn child is the child of the unloved wife, then when it comes time for him to pass his inheritance to his sons, he may not give his inheritance due the firstborn to the son of the loved wife in place of the son of the unloved one, who was in fact the firstborn. So what God is, in a nutshell, what's being said here is no favoritism. The Lord shows, the Lord does not love me more than he loves you. He doesn't love Kathleen more than he loves me. It doesn't matter where you're at or what you're doing in your walk. That his love is not based on that. His love is based on his love. I mean, why do you love different people? You probably can't even really define it. Honestly, I like almost everyone I meet. It's really hard to find a person you dislike when you meet them. You know what I mean? You like them, but you don't love them. So why do one category of people you love and the other category, you like them? And then you have a category like your spouse that you are in love with. What even defines that? What creates that? Why is that? See? And so this is what the Lord is saying. He loves all of us, not based on what we're doing. He loves us just because he loves us. Sharon.
Well, this probably has a lot of chutzpah, but I've always felt that God does love me more than everybody else, but that's because He knows me intimately,
Yeah.
and He knows me so well that I think, how can He love anybody else more? Although I know that's not true.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think that's a good attitude to have, as long as it doesn't go to the extreme. If it goes to the extreme, now you've fallen into sin. I think it's a good idea to know that God loves me. He's crazy in love with me. Crazy in love. And I have the same feeling. I think God loves me more than anybody. But I would never get up and say that. And in fact, I don't really believe that, but I hold to it because it puts me in that special place. Because that's part of love. Part of love, the recipient of love needs to feel as if they are in that special place that no one else occupies. And so God makes that possible for us to actually feel that way, at the same time that we know and understand that's not really true. And I don't want to come out with that kind of an arrogant.
Because God so loved the world.
God loves the non-believer as much as He loves you.
Because He says God so loved the world.
Yeah.
That He gave His only begotten Son.
Amen. That's powerful. And we need to know this. And no favoritism. Frank.
No favoritism.
In that scripture, it says that he should give a double portion of everything he owns to the son. How do you give twice as much as you own to somebody?
It's a good question, but it's not twice as much of what you own. You're going to divide your inheritance up between your children. So let's say you have 4 children. They would typically all get 1/4, 25%. But in biblical times, you were to give the firstborn actually 50%, and then you divide the other 50 3 ways.
Okay.
And that was the special honor given to the firstborn, because the firstborn then took on all kinds of obligation to become the patriarch of the family, the head of the family. Let me finish this off. Maria, sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
About the love. Is it because the problem that we have is that we only have one word to define what love is? The Greeks had, 4 different words for
4.
love. Could it be that in God's realm, just like time, the word love to Him is many, many facets that we can never really understand, so we just use the word, God loves me. For God so loved the world. It could be a different phase.
Well, it's totally different. If you're growing in love, the day Kathleen and I got married, I loved her. But now when I say I love you, it's much deeper, much more multifaceted than the day we got married.
It's a different love for your mother or your...
Yeah. Yeah, love is nearly impossible to define.
It is.
You know, it's a very difficult word. So you have to leave that with God. We have a taste of it on this planet in the various realms in which we love, but I think God has, we might have 5 or 6 understandings. He probably has thousands upon thousands of understandings. Yeah.
Just like when you said, when you gave us the lecture on time, that 80 years for us is equivalent to about an hour with God.
Yeah.
See, I remember. Quote.
You do remember. That's very good.
We were talking about that.
Yeah, that's very good.
And I says, watch, she's gonna have some.
Maria always has quotes.
If I can only remember what I did with my keys, I would.
But I was getting nervous because she may remember what I said, but I don't.
But she can't remember her telephone number.
Yeah.
She just quoted this
So in number one, B1 here, then, Jew and Gentile are equal as one new man. And it's interesting because when you go in and you fight your enemies and you take these female prisoners, these are not Israelites. These are Gentiles. It was never against Torah for a Jew to marry a Gentile. That's a Jewish myth.
If they become Jewish.
Yeah, they don't have to become Jewish. Well, according to the Jews, they do.
Yeah.
That's how they get around this.
Yeah.
But in God's economy, the Jew could marry the Gentile. The Jew just couldn't marry the pagan, the one that was actively worshiping false gods. Okay?
And Jews believe persons are pagan.
But not all of them.
Right.
See? So, and so here we see this equality between Jew and Gentile. Okay? That you and I understand so well. In a couple of scriptures, we won't look them up for sake of time, but 2 Corinthians 5:17 says that when we accept Messiah, we become new creatures in Messiah. And then Galatians 6:15 and 16 tells us that as these new creatures, we become the Israel of God. You don't become Jewish, but you are what we can call spiritual Israel. Now, of course, in the Messianic movement, that becomes a hot button term like so many other things. That's Galatians 6:15 and 16. But Paul refers to believers as the Israel of God. You are true Israel if you believe in Messiah. Doesn't matter whether you're Jew or Gentile. Believers in Messiah are the true Israel. Okay? Yeah, we won't get into that because I think again, we go back to that definition of love. There's a lot of facets to that thing. Okay, Roman numeral 6. Deuteronomy 22, 1-3. Look at this real quickly here. I'll finish this up in just a couple seconds, 1-3. You are not to watch your brother's ox or sheep straying and behave as if you hadn't seen it. You must bring it back to your brother. If your brother is not close by or you don't know who the owner is, you're to bring the animal into your house. It'll remain with you until your brother asks for it, and then you're to give it back. You're to do the same with the donkey, his coat, anything of your brother's that he loses. If you find something he lost, you must not ignore it. Okay? And what this is in Roman numeral 6, this is the mitzvah of restoring that which is lost. Restoring that which is lost. We have to really watch out for this and the spiritual significance of this. I mean, obviously, it works on the more literal realm as well. I mean, if you see your brother misplace something and you know where it is and you want it, and then he's looking for it and you don't tell him where it is because you want it, that's a problem. That's called sin. Okay. But on a spiritual sense is what I want to hit it on. We restore that which is lost. In letter A, Romans 11:11, this is our last scripture today. Romans 11:11 says this. In that case, I say, isn't it that they have stumbled with the result that they have permanently fallen away? He's talking about Israel, natural Israel. Heaven forbid, quite the contrary. It is by means of their stumbling that the deliverance has come to the Gentiles. We should be thanking God they stumbled. Because according to this scripture, I mean, what is the reciprocal of this? If they hadn't stumbled, maybe we wouldn't have been included. Romans 11:11. And it says, by means of their stumbling, the deliverance has come to the Gentiles in order to provoke them to jealousy. So here's the bottom line. We should be restoring in one another different things. In letter A, it's Christianity's duty to return Messiah to the Jews. They've lost the Messiah. They never found him, but they lost him. And we have the Messiah. We need to return Messiah to the Jews. And likewise, the Jewish believers need to return Torah to the Gentile believers. Because we've lost the Torah.
Just like we were watching Into the West, how sad we were
Yeah.
that their heritage was taken away.
Yeah. This is our heritage. And it's been removed because we want to keep it to ourselves, or we come up with our dogmas that say, well, Jews get saved a different way than Christians. No, they don't. They get saved the same way. Because there's no preference, there's no favoritism. And we need to return what we're learning about how Torah points to Yeshua. We have to return that to the Jews. It's an obligation that is really incumbent upon us to do that. And sometimes we shy away because we are taught in replacement theology that Jews get saved a different way than non-Jews. Non-Jews have to receive Messiah, and Jews just have to follow the Torah and their traditions. And that's just not the case. We all need the Messiah. And that includes the written as well as the living. Amen? That's our message for today, guys.